Let me in. I'm a frequent lurker of this sub and figured I'd never have anything to contribute. Definitely a good thing. However, having had to call the police tonight, non-emergency, no worries. I remembered an unsettling series of events that occurred around 14 years ago when I was in the 8th grade. Warning, this story is kind of a slow burn. I grew up in the rural South, next door to my grandparents. We lived in a deeply wooded area right off of the highway on a large plot of land my grandparents owned. When this took place, only my grandmother was alive. While not huge, our woods were large enough to act as a home for deer, rabbits, foxes, and the like. Just to give you a sense of how in the boonies this was, at the edge of our land was a family-owned dairy farm and fields along the highway. Google Maps still can't locate my childhood address. Near the end of 8th grade, our class went on a day-to-day field trip and parents were to pick us up at 10 p.m. This being before the cell phone boom, I was pretty embarrassed and upset when no one came to get me from school. We tried calling my house phone. No go. About an hour late, my dad finally came to get me in his pickup, calm but visibly rattled. As it turned out, as my dad was leaving to get me, 4 strange men were lurking through our large wooded yard. Burly redneck he is, my dad chased them through the woods until they disappeared into the field, our tiny Pekingese pug giving chase right along with him. The police were called, but there wasn't much they could do aside from filing a report. While scary, I was kind of an oblivious child, and with the police having been called, I figured it was over with. Addicts would sometimes steal lawnmowers and weed eaters. It happens. Looking back, the things that happened over the following months make my skin crawl. I began to notice strange cars parked off the highway near our home in the middle of the night. Given that our house was tucked back into the woods, it was easy for them to keep the license plate turned away from the view of our windows. The cars were always just sitting there, no one getting out or in, nothing whatsoever to even feign a breakdown. We called the police when we noticed these strange cars, but the distance to our home made it so that they had always driven off by the time anyone reached us. I didn't understand this at the time, but we were clearly being watched. Even as an adult, I don't understand what these people wanted. We lived in a little trailer that didn't exactly scream, "Drug money awaits," and there were equally isolated yet affluent neighborhoods that were easily accessible. My parents worked full-time during the day, and my sister and I were both teenagers in school, so why not break in during the day? As I said, our home was wooded, shielded off a dirt road from the highway we lived on, so no one would have even noticed. I was in bed when the men came back. It seemed the strange car visits had lessened, but my father went out late one evening to get CDs from his pickup, and they were out there, again. My mother made us stay inside when she called the police, but I remember the sound of my father screaming as he thundered after them. Just like last time, They disappeared into the woods. The police couldn't find them. They agreed that they were stalking us out. We were poor, so there was no money for security equipment. My mother had never allowed guns in the house until this point, but my grandfather's old rifles were now being kept in their closet. While we lived in our trailer, our grandmother lived beside us in a little brick house she built with my grandfather in the 70s. It had an old-fashioned carport with steps that led to her front door, clunky with frosted glass shutters from top to bottom. It made a distinct, heavy sound of shaking glass when it was being knocked on. Usually, a family member would sleep over with her in case she needed something, but she had been feeling well that day and didn't need help. She always stayed up late watching television and liked to sleep during the day when it was sunny and warm. A man came to her door sometime past 3 in the morning. She called out to ask who it was, thinking it might be one of us. There was no answer. He continued to knock while my grandmother told him to go away and leave her alone. Instead, he opened her door. It was old and fairly easy to unlock, but her chain lock kept him from getting in, so he spoke directly to her through the crack. He would only tell her, "Come on, let me in. Let me in, I know you're alone." I have no idea how she kept her calm through this, or how she had the nerve to lie on her couch and get equally irate with the strange man at her door in the night. She couldn't walk well, and her phone was in the kitchen. After 15 minutes of this exchange, the stranger calmly closed the door and went away. My grandmother called our home first. He could be coming to us next, and then the police. I was sitting in my grandfather's recliner, listening as she told the officers what had happened. She was calm then too, with her jaw stuck out in anger. Obviously, nothing ever came of it. We never found out who was watching us or why. The man never came back. The strangers in their unfamiliar cars stopped coming. We never saw anyone outside again. To whoever wanted to come inside, let's not meet. To my grandmother, let's meet again.
Someone smashed a window right behind me.
Back when I was in the 8th grade, my mom and my brother had to venture out to Guitar Center to get my brother's guitar fixed. This meant that I was going to be home alone for an hour or two, which I was pretty used to. 13-year-old me immediately hops onto Minecraft. I started playing with two of my friends and I was talking to them via Skype. It was a sunny day outside, and it was also a school day, so there was nothing to be scared about outside or anything. After about 30 minutes of playing, I heard a loud bang that came from outside. It scared me, but I thought nothing of it. It sounded like it came from my backyard, but I assumed it was just my neighbors working or doing something else. Now, the room I'm in has a sliding glass door and windows all around it. I could not see outside because my mom put the blinds and curtains over every window before she left, just for my safety. I should have gotten up to check out what the noise was, but I was pretty focused on whatever I was doing in Minecraft. Another loud bang happened, and this time I was sure it was on our house. I asked my friends in a whisper if they heard what I heard, but my mic didn't pick it up. Then I saw him for the first time. The blinds didn't reach all the way to the floor, so there was about 6 inches of space on the bottom of the sliding glass door that you could see out of. 2 black shoes were all I saw. At this point, I'm freaking out. I put down my headset and am thinking of what to do. In the midst of me looking at the shoes and figuring out what to do, the window directly behind me smashed, glass going all over me. The sound of it made my heart come out of my body. I quickly turn around and another man is behind the blinds that were still hanging, but I was able to see him. He had a crowbar and was wearing a black hat. Without thinking, I make a bolt for the front door, not knowing if he was chasing me or not. I should also mention I had a really bad leg injury from my track meet the previous day, and it was so bad I could barely walk. I didn't even feel the pain. I had so much adrenaline. I quickly threw open the front door and shut it right away without looking back. I ran across the street to my neighbor's and climbed and jumped over her fence, still not noticing how bad my leg was hurting. Knocking on her door frantically for about 15 seconds, she came out and I just rushed inside and told her to call 911. The police showed up to my neighbor's house within 10 minutes, and I pointed across the street to where my house was. They went through the entire house and through the backyard, but there was no one there anymore. The police came back to talk to me and said they found a partially smashed bathroom window, first sound, and partially smashed sliding glass door, second sound, and of course the window completely smashed that was behind me. The 2 guys were never found. The weird thing about the whole thing is why they were breaking into my house in complete daylight and on a school day. My friends who heard the whole thing through my mic heard the crash of the window and some faint voices. The police even talked to them through my headset for the police report. The whole event freaked me out for the next month, though I did get a lot of popularity in school. I'm going to be a senior this year, and now I'm completely over it, thankfully. I even joke about it a lot now. Thanks for reading, and I apologize for my terrible writing and anything else.
It gave him a thrill.
This was 10 years ago, just after my parents divorced and were in the process of selling my childhood home. My mom had moved across town, and my dad, who traveled for a living, was gone for long stretches of time, leaving my older brother and I alone often. As teenagers, we didn't mind. Even with this upheaval at home, our lives were fairly routine. Both of us worked and were in school, so we left and got home at the same times each day. At night, we'd go to the gym just outside of our neighborhood for a couple of hours. My brother's friend James would join us. One night, James, my brother, and another one of their friends, Christopher, were hanging out at our house, washing their cars in preparation for the weekend. Since it was dark, my brother had borrowed my keys to illuminate the driveway with my headlights so they could see. When they were finished, my brother asked me if I felt like going to the gym with them, and I declined. I wasn't feeling up to it, so they left me home alone. Before I went upstairs to my bedroom to blare music, now that the house was empty, I'd noticed that the front door was unlocked and the back door was locked. This detail didn't particularly alarm me because we lived in a safe neighborhood centered by golf courses and a country club. In other words, I had nothing to worry about. I went to my room and listened to loud music for about a half an hour with my door shut. Then, hungry, I went downstairs to fix myself something to eat. That's when I noticed the front door was locked. I wasn't too concerned at this point. Perhaps I had locked it before I went upstairs. I didn't remember locking it, but it was the most rational explanation. Then, I noticed the back door was unlocked. I definitely didn't unlock the back door. As irrational, then, as it seemed, it hit me with a jolt. Somebody was in our house. My brother had left my car keys on the counter in the kitchen. I grabbed them and ran out the front door to my car. I put the keys in the ignition, and it didn't start. My brother had left the lights on. The battery was dead. It was like being in a horror movie. Frantic, I called my brother. Since he had his headphones plugged into his phone listening to music while he worked out, he was forced to answer. I think somebody is or was in our house, I said. I told him about the front door and how I didn't lock it, so either somebody was in our house or in our backyard. Can you please come home? And as I said this, a man with a miniature baseball bat comes from the side yard of our house. His pace was quick, as if he didn't want to be seen, but it slowed once he'd reached the road, where he walked normally, as if nothing had happened. I told my brother what I just saw. I recognize him. I said, "It's our neighbor." My brother and his friends came rushing home about 10 minutes later. I repeated the story. "Okay," my brother, a hothead, said, "we're going over to his house." I sat back at home after the four of us had checked every room in the house with my dad's gun. It was clear no one was there. When they came back, they told me that they'd knocked on the front door and an older woman had answered. The look on her face, James said later, was like she'd been expecting us. And that's when her middle-aged son, the guy with the bat, came down, my brother said. Before we even spoke, he yelled out, "I didn't break into anybody's house." "We never said that," my brother had said. "We just wanted to tell you that somebody was in our house just now." The mother had taken on a protective, though somewhat submissive stance. "Listen, I'm so sorry. It won't happen again. I promise it." My brother and his friends saw in her eyes that she knew that they were telling the truth, that her son wasn't. "It better not," my brother had said. looking up at her son behind her. When they got home, they recounted this story for me, and we began to dissect what had happened. We'd seen this man before. He was older, late 30s, early 40s, and lived with his elderly parents. He only seemed to come out at night when he would go on long walks around the neighborhood, muttering to himself, carrying a miniature baseball bat to fend off dogs, as he'd been overheard telling a neighbor. He obviously had mental problems of some kind, and he'd obviously been watching our house. He knew our routine. We determined that he may have mistaken my brother's friend Christopher for me, and thinking the house was empty, entered through the unlocked front door. When he realized that I was home, he then left through the back door and had hidden in the backyard until he thought the coast was clear. How long he'd been inside, we weren't sure, but I'd been in my room for at least half an hour. Why he was breaking into our house, we didn't know, but we guessed it wasn't the first time he'd done something like this, and it may have been the overactive and speculative imaginations of a bunch of teenagers, but we guessed he did it because running around someone's empty house, unbeknownst to them, gave him some kind of sick thrill. Perhaps stalking people gave him something to do, and it was clear to us that he probably couldn't help himself, that he'd probably do it again.
Crazed hillbilly in the holler.
I'll start off by giving you some background info. It was 2009. I was roughly an 18 to 19-year-old female living in a trailer house at the opening of a holler in Kentucky, Williamsburg for those familiar, with my boyfriend Josh and our roommate Brent, who both worked in town at the local Mickey D's. I had just moved to town, so I didn't have a job yet. One night, Josh and Brent both had to work the late shift and left me home alone. This wasn't unusual and had happened a few times before. The way our trailer was set up was you walked up some steps to a porch where the front door was. Upon entering, it's the living room with a hallway to the right, where mine and Josh's room and a spare room was. Brent had the master bedroom to the left through the living room and kitchen area. There was a back door that was also in the kitchen next to the master bedroom door. There wasn't much in our living room except a TV, a Xbox, and a couple of couches, with a bat laid next to the front door. Anyways, I was sitting on the couch nearest the front door, which has two huge windows on both sides. The couch was directly in front of one of them. Watching TV as I usually did, being I had no phone or any other way to contact the outside world. Several hours into me watching TV, around 12 a.m., I heard the front doorknob jiggling like someone was trying to get in. My heart instantly dropped into my stomach. With no way to contact anyone, and the nearest neighbor being across a huge field way out of earshot, I thought for sure I was dead. For those of you who aren't familiar with Kentucky, there's a stereotype, crazy hillbilly, that supposedly wander around and live in said hollers. I figured this was just used to scare kids and rowdy teens, etc. Well, apparently, I was wrong. I got up and grabbed the bat next to the couch I was sitting on to see if maybe it was my roommate or my boyfriend coming home from work early. But seeing as I didn't hear a car arrive or any doors, this was highly unlikely. When I looked through the peephole, whoever it was had it covered so I couldn't see their face. I nearly pissed myself. I turned off all the lights and locked every window and door in the house, hoping he or she would just go away if I ignored them. Dear God, was I wrong. This person proceeded to jiggle the front door handle some more. Some trailers have doors that are pretty easy if you mess with them enough. Till I guess they got frustrated and ran around to the back door and started the same jiggling, trying to see into the window on the back door. This went on for a good 20 minutes of this person terrorizing me, running back and forth from door to door, then started to bang and shake all the windows as they ran around my house. At this point, I'm in a ball crying in the living room on the floor with the bat, praying that they wouldn't try to break down the old-ass doors. Eventually, after about 45 minutes of terrorizing me, I guess they gave up and went back to wherever they came from. My boyfriend showed up about 15 minutes later, and I made him check the house and outside. We never found anyone, but we did find some footprints in the mud that were smudged in the morning. So, creepy holler hillbilly, whoever you may be, please, let's not ever meet.